Look, I cover a ton of robot vacuum systems here on the channel, not only because they're cool products, but also because it's a product I use nearly every single day. And not only that, many people that I know personally are interested in these and they want to get one for themselves. But it's also an industry that is evolving rapidly, and so choosing which one to get, well, it can often be tough. But when MOVA reached out and wanted to sponsor this video, they sent over this, the V50 Ultra Complete. And well, even though most robot vacuum brands on the market say that, this is the best, when you actually use this and put it to the test, it actually lives up to that name. It's packing a ton. Now, let's be real, nearly every single robot vacuum system, especially the high-end ones, all of them on the market have some version of similar features because they're all competing with each other and trying to give you the ultimate clean for the most convenience. And that's no different with what MOVA is delivering here. But what MOVA kind of has going for it, I think, is that it's a relatively new company. This was just launched, this brand, in 2024. So we're barely into the life cycle of these products. And so that means they're bringing some new things to the market that make this just probably the one to get right now. For me, the most exciting thing, I guess, is the hardware, because this is packing a ton, like I said. So this is an all-in-one system. So you get the robot itself, which has a bunch of sensors built in. It has a vacuum, it has a mop system, and it has a base station where you can clean and empty water. It will wash the mop heads, which I'll talk about more in a second. And it has a spot for solution so you can get even better cleaning. Everything you would want is here. And the goal here from MOVA, at least what they say, and makes sense, is that they want this to be as worry-free as possible. The less hassle, the better. And when you have all these things built in, well, that does tend to help. Now, there are two things about the robot hardware that caught my attention up front. First is right up top, you see it immediately. And this is what they call the FlexiRise LDS laser navigation system. And the reason it's called FlexiRise is because it does exactly that. It can go flat or it can rise up to actually function. And at first you would think that that's kind of a gimmick and not really necessary, but what it does is allow the robot to fit into really low areas, like under furniture. It uses its laser navigation, which I think is still the best way to do it in the industry, so it can map your home, see obstacles, find furniture, all that stuff, which is great, but if it gets to that couch or whatever piece of furniture that it wants to get under and clean, it can just lower down that laser module, clean up, and come right out. And so that could be a really beneficial feature, because I know a lot of the times where those dust bunnies hide, all the pet hair, all that stuff, they go underneath the cabinets or underneath the furniture where these robots a lot of times can't get to. This tries to solve that problem. Now, the other thing that really caught my eye, because it's something I needed fixed in my own situation here in my home, is this. Yes, this is the Step Master system, and what it does is allow the robot to actually climb over different thresholds up to 6 centimeters tall, or just under 2.5 inches. And so this means areas where a robot vacuum would simply not be able to get to before, well, now it can. And it uses these bio-inspired wheels that actually swing out, lift up the entire robot, and then it can move forward and climb over. And for me, the place I needed this most is actually kind of silly, because at first glance, you'd think the robot would be able to handle this no problem. But time after time, robots get stuck in this one spot, and it's thanks to this carpet. Now, granted, I hate this carpet. It really is not nice in any way, shape, or form, so we're gonna replace it at some point. But until then, at least once a week, a robot will get stuck in this carpet because it's just a little too high and the rollers get stuck. But with this new system, all I have to do is go into the app and tell it that this is a threshold, somewhere that it needs to lift up. And now that I do that, it just lifts itself up, climbs over it, no problem. And in my testing so far, it has never gotten stuck here. And so yeah, that is a major benefit for me, because oftentimes I would wake up in the morning, come downstairs, and my carpet is all over the place and the robot is stuck. It didn't complete its job. It didn't do the cleaning I wanted it to do. And that's simply because of this silly little carpet. But now, that's not an issue. And so if you have different, I guess, more real thresholds, like in between rooms where you have different materials, this should be able to handle it no problem. I guess next, all I'd like to see is that maybe this thing could start climbing stairs. That would be cool. We're not quite there yet, but I think that's next. Now, those are some of the cool features that stood out to me up front, and they are very useful, but at the end of the day, if they can't clean whenever they get to those places, well, it doesn't really matter much, but this is probably one of the best robot vacuum and mop systems I've ever used. It cleans extremely well. On the vacuum side, this has a few key features that really benefit it. First is the suction power. It has 24,000 pascals of suction, which is the highest I've ever tested. And on the bottom, it has this dual brush that is anti-tangle, so it shouldn't get stuck up with hair. And it does this in a few different ways. First, it's a dual brush, so it really does a good job of sweeping everything into the vacuum itself, so it sucks it up. But it's only attached on one end, and it's made to kind of siphon all of that hair and debris to one end of the vacuum so that it doesn't end up getting tangled. Now look, eventually hair will get caught up in the system. That's just how these things work. That's life. If you've ever lived in a home with someone who seems to shed hair, I guess is the nice way to say it, you know that hair gets everywhere. And eventually it will get caught up in the robot itself too. But they're doing everything they can to prevent that the most possible. And it's really easy to clean if it ever does happen. But this anti-tangle doesn't just stay for the roller brush, it also applies to the wheels, which those often can get caught up with hair. And the wheel up front, over time, hopefully those don't get caught up with nearly as much hair as you might be used to. And this also has an extendable brush head so that when it's going along walls and getting into corners, it can reach out, hopefully get every single thing in that corner. That seems to work really well. And because of the smarts built in, like I said, it can actually detect dirt and see messes that are going on. And one cool feature is that if it detects dirt along a baseboard, for example, most robot vacuums are spinning the brush, and what ends up happening is it just spits that dirt into the middle of the room. Typically, it's not really that big of a deal because then the robot will pick it up over there. But this can actually detect debris and it will slow down the brush so that it actually sucks it up the first time. That's a really nice, subtle feature, but it does actually make a difference. Now on the mopping side, this is using the Flex Boost Mopping System 2.0. And this is a spinning brush which has two mop heads instead of the roller brush that we've seen on some other robot vacuums. Really the only downside I've seen to this, it's not really a downside, but just something that makes a difference, is that roller brush seems to be able to go for longer because it can actually clean and suck up the debris as it's cleaning. Whereas this is really scrubbing, but it has to go back to the base station more to clean itself off. Neither I think is that much better than the other, but either way, this one works really well. Now, one of the reasons it cleans so well is because it spins at up to 260 RPM, and at the same time, it's able to put 8 newtons of pressure, which is about 1.8 pounds. So, you know, imagine that kind of scrubbing, that's pretty solid. And it also has what MOVA calls the Flexi Press mop pad. And basically what that means is it can actually tilt and move the mop pad itself so that it's in constant pressure. So even if you have a little bit of a lip, maybe over a threshold, it can rotate up to 5 degrees and keep that pressure going. That's really nice. Again, the goal there is to keep 100% contact at all times, which equals better cleaning. And just like on the vacuum side, this has an extendable mop head so it can reach into those corners. It does a really good job at that. But I think the biggest benefit that this gets from cleaning is when you look at the base station. First is that it can actually use hot water on the brush heads so that it gives just an ultimate clean. Not only will it clean the mop heads with hot water up to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, which is super hot, but it can also use hot water on the mop pads itself as it continues to clean. And we all know that, you know, using hot water is a better way to clean than cold water, so this just helps with that. The robot itself can't produce hot water, but it can go back to the base station and, you know, suck up that hot water. But in this base station, alongside that clean water tank and the dirty water tank, you also have this dispenser for different detergents. And MOVA gives you a, you know, more typical detergent for everyday use, and they also give you one that's a little more hard-hitting for pet odors, and you can decide which one you want to use or use none of them at all. You can just fill it up, put it back in, and in the app tell it what you want to do. And when it goes out and cleans and comes back, then the mop head is washed and cleaned, and then it is dried, which I think is one of the most important things so that it doesn't start smelling or getting any mildew. But what is really nice is that this actually dries multiple parts of the base station, including the 3-liter dustbin. And you know, really this shouldn't be wet, but it does seem to happen every once in a while and moisture can get in there, but it dries that section as well so that you shouldn't have any problem with smells or anything bacteria or mold or anything like that. It dries the entire area. That is really nice. So yeah, I mean, the whole point with these robot vacuums is to give you a hassle-free and as much of a touch-free experience as you can get. And typically with a lot of these, that is the case until something goes wrong. And for me in my house, that ends up being a few weeks into using them. They get stuck, you know, something happens. But for me so far, the MOVA V50 hasn't had that issue. It has features built in that solves the issue I had with other robots on the market, and it's working so far. But if you want to check this out and pick one up for yourself, I'll leave links down below in the description. This is where you can find the absolute best pricing and all the information you need, so check that out. But yeah, if you are in the market for a robot vacuum system like this, well, now is probably the best time to buy.